HOA. Karen unlocked my door, then froze when she saw police waiting inside. The first sound that cut through the quiet of that Saturday afternoon wasn't my baby's cry or the hum of the ceiling fan, but the soft, unmistakable click of a key sliding into a lock that wasn't supposed to be touched by anyone but me. My blood chilled as I watched the handle jiggle, then turn, like a snake testing the air before striking. I had left the porch light off, curtains drawn, every sign saying nobody's home. But I was home, and I knew exactly who it was. Karen. For months, she had threatened to inspect my house. Sometimes she waved violation slips, sometimes she dropped hints about bylaws, but it always ended with the same smug declaration. If you have nothing to hide, you won't mind me checking. She had stalked the street like a self-appointed queen, obese frame filling the sidewalks, clipboard clutched like a weapon, sunglasses flashing with predatory arrogance. Neighbors whispered, but never fought her outright. She thrived on their silence. But she made a fatal mistake when she turned her sights on me. I crouched in the hallway, my heart pounding, listening to the tumblers click. And then it happened. The door swung open. There she stood, one foot planted on my threshold, purse hanging heavy from her arm, a look of entitlement spreading across her face as though she'd just claimed victory in a war no one else knew existed. Another lazy homeowner, she muttered, stepping in. Time to see what's really going on in here. But this wasn't her battlefield. This was mine, because what she didn't know was that I'd been waiting. I'd already reported her threats to the police, already explained the pattern of harassment, already handed over the recordings of her boasting about how she could enter anyone's home if the HOA deemed it necessary. The officers had listened, disbelief giving way to fury. So when I suggested they set a trap me home as bait, they didn't hesitate. The moment Karen crossed the threshold, 3 figures stepped from the shadows of my living room. Uniforms crisp, badges gleaming, voices steady as stone. Ma'am, you are trespassing. Step away from the property immediately. Karen froze, her face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Wait, what? No, I have authority here. I'm the HOA president. One officer raised his hand, palm firm. You have no legal right to enter a private residence. The homeowner filed a complaint. And now, you've been caught in the act. I stepped out behind them, arms crossed. The rush of vindication flooded me. For once, she wasn't towering over me with false power. For once, she was the one cornered, stripped of her illusions. Surprise, Karen, I said, my voice laced with steel. This is what happens when you mistake intimidation for authority. She sputtered, shaking her head, her voice rising into that shrill pitch every neighbor dreaded. This is harassment. He's lying. You can't believe him. I was just conducting an inspection for the good of the community. But then came the twist, the one that cracked the room open like thunder. From the kitchen doorway, another figure emerged, Mr. Lee, a quiet man in his 60s who lived 2 houses down. He carried a folder thick with papers. His hands trembled, but his eyes burned with long-buried anger. She's been doing this for years, he said, his voice breaking. I didn't have the courage to speak up before. She let herself into my house last year while I was at work. Claimed she was checking for water damage. I came home to find my drawers rifled through. He handed the folder to the lead officer. I kept the letters, the notes she slipped under my door, even the fake fines. It's all here. Karen spun toward him, her face twisted with rage. You traitor. After everything I did for this neighborhood. But the room had shifted. The neighbors who had trickled in, hearing the commotion, now stood clustered at the doorway, phones raised, recording every word. The queen had no subjects left, only witnesses to her downfall. The officer flipped through the folder, his jaw tightening. Looks like we'll be adding breaking and entering, fraud, and harassment to the list. Ma'am, you're under arrest. Karen shrieked, stumbling backward as the cuffs clicked around her wrists. You can't arrest me. I am the law here. I run this street. But her words collapsed under the weight of reality. The officers led her out onto the porch, her heels clattering against the floorboards, her clipboard slipping from her grasp to clatter across the tiles like the hollow crown it had always been. Neighbors laughed, some cheered, others just stood in stunned silence, processing the sight of the tyrant undone. The very woman who had once dictated the color of their doors, the length of their grass, The number of cars in their driveways was now being marched into the back of a squad car, her empire reduced to ash in the eyes of those she once terrorized. And yet, the strangest thing I felt wasn't triumph. It was relief. Relief that the nightmare was finally ending, that the shadows of her intimidation were finally pierced by the light of truth. But little did I know, Karen's downfall wasn't just about me. It was about all of us. And the days that followed would prove it. The squad car's taillights faded into the dusk, leaving a stunned hush over the street. Neighbors lingered on sidewalks, whispering, shaking their heads, some laughing nervously as though they had just woken from a long nightmare. For years, Karen had stalked these homes like a self-proclaimed warden, her clipboard a weapon, her voice a gavel. Now she was gone, her reign broken not by her own power, but by her greed and arrogance. And yet, what happened next was far bigger than one woman in handcuffs. The police investigation cracked open her world like a rotten egg. Officers combed through her HOA office, really just a converted spare bedroom in her home, and discovered files that made even the deputies whistle under their breath. Stacks of fake citations, forged letters with bogus county seals, spreadsheets listing offenders, and the fines she'd pocketed. She had siphoned thousands from her neighbors, all under the guise of community fees. One officer described it bluntly. This isn't an HOA, this is a racket. The trial was scheduled within weeks. By then, the story had already spread to local news outlets. Reporters camped on our street, their cameras capturing the sight of ordinary families stepping forward with trembling voices and manila folders of evidence. Mrs. Alvarez, who had been fined for painting her shutters blue, produced bank receipts showing Karen had demanded cash payments. The Johnsons testified how Karen threatened to tow their car unless they handed over permit fees. Every new witness was another stone in the avalanche that buried her. I'll never forget the day of the hearing. The courthouse buzzed with a restless energy. Karen entered wearing a blazer 2 sizes too tight, her hair stiff with hairspray, her mouth twisted into that familiar smirk as though she still believed the world owed her obedience. She tried to lock eyes with neighbors, daring them to flinch. But no one did. The prosecutor laid out the evidence methodically. The videos of her trespassing, the forged citations, the testimonies of neighbors who had been bullied into silence. And then came the twist that made the air crackle. Jessica, the young woman who had once been Karen's assistant, stepped forward again, this time with a USB drive. She made me type emails under her name. Jessica confessed, her voice quivering. She told me to threaten families with foreclosure. I saved the files because I was afraid someday I'd need proof. The screen lit up with Karen's own words, emails dripping with arrogance. If they resist, double the fine. Remind them the HOA always wins. The jury didn't even look at her after that. They looked at us, the people she had wronged. And I could see it in their eyes. They believed us. Karen's lawyer scrambled, painting her as misguided but well-intentioned. He even dared to say she loved the community too much. But the facade collapsed when the prosecutor read the balance sheets from her accounts, showing the trail of money diverted straight into her pockets. Love doesn't look like stealing thousands from your neighbors. When the verdict came, it was thunder. Guilty, 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 fraud, trespassing, harassment, extortion. The judge leaned forward, his voice sharp enough to slice stone. You betrayed trust. You created fear where there should have been community. You abused authority you never truly had. And for that, you will serve 5 years in prison and repay every cent you stole. The gasp that swept through the courtroom was followed by silence, then the sound of quiet applause from the benches. Not celebration, but relief. Karen's face contorted as deputies clasped cuffs around her wrists again. This isn't fair, she shrieked. I kept order. Without me, this place will fall apart. But no one followed her out this time. No one bowed their heads. She was alone, her empire crumbling into dust. What happened after was nothing short of transformation. Freed from her shadow, neighbors began to breathe again. We held our first true community meeting, not under her command, but together. Folding chairs lined the park lawn, the air thick with voices no longer afraid. People shared ideas, volunteered time, laughed without fear of fines. The sense of unity was overwhelming. Mr. Lee, the quiet man who had exposed her break-ins, spoke softly but firmly. We let one person scare us into silence. Never again. From now on, This neighborhood belongs to all of us." His words ignited applause so loud it shook the trees. Emily squeezed my hand, tears glistening in her eyes as she whispered, "She almost broke us. But you turned it around." I shook my head. "No, we turned it around. All of us." Weeks later, I walked down the street with our baby cradled in my arms. For the first time, the air felt light. Kids rode bikes freely, their laughter ringing like bells. Front yards blossomed with flowers of every color, no longer painted by Karen's rules, but by choice. Neighbors waved, stopped to chat, shared tools and meals. What had once been a street ruled by fear was now a community built on trust. And yet, every time I pass my front door, I remember the sound of that key turning in the lock. It's a reminder of how close we came to letting arrogance destroy us. It's a reminder that power unchecked will always consume, unless people are brave enough to stand against it. So I'll leave you with this. When someone abuses authority and tramples over your home, your dignity, your piecito, you stay silent. Or do you draw the line? What do you think was Karen's punishment enough? Or should her downfall have gone further? Share your thoughts. Was this justice or just the beginning?